I just got back from Lake Toho, and as you can see, I'm cleaning out the boat because I make a mess when I go fishing. But I want to give you kind of a recap. We're going to run through the exact technique breakdown because there's some really big tournaments out there on Lake Toho and the Kissimmee Chain coming up. So I want to throw down all the patterns that we ran into out there because we caught some big fish, and we actually scored what I would call a pretty big bag out there for the way it was fishing. So tune in, hit subscribe, hit like. We're going to talk fishing patterns. Oh God. There's some big tournaments out on Toho and the Kissimmee Chain coming up. So I want to kind of break down this pattern because it was fishing pretty tough when I was out there, and I think we kind of figured something out. But I want to give you the in-depth deets, show you exactly what bait, what kind of setup we were using, and break down exactly how we caught. I think we had one day, we had probably like 23 pounds or so. Went back out with my buddy Gage, which you probably won't see on video, but I'll show some clips today. He's an epic stick. He used to fish high school fishing, but he's up there on Toho. Very cool kid. We didn't have a big bag, but we caught a bunch of fish, you know, in a few hour period until we got blown off the lake. So let's break down that pattern. Lake Toho, little road trip, dude. Patterns, breakdown. I was on the road for 5 days, and this is what my tray looks like. Can you, I mean, jeez Louise. So the simple breakdown of Lake Toho is I wish I would have brought my buddy Jacob Wall down because he is a master jerkbait fisherman, dude. And that's what it was all about. It was all about these guys. Hard plastic jerkbaits and actually soft jerkbaits as well. But there was some specific features that really were required to get some of those bigger bites. So overall, pattern was kind of interesting. I went in with the attitude or the approach that I'm going to be catching these fish shallow. Like there's going to be a bunch of pre-spawn kind of staging fish up in the shallows moving around, and there might even be some sight fish. We've had really mild weather in Florida. I said it a million times in the, but by the way, I'll put links to the 2 days of videos that we have from Toho too, so you guys can go back and watch them. But we've had really mild conditions down here, so these fish, what I'm starting to wonder is if they never really got out of a late summer kind of mode, or if they got out of it and then it warmed up again and they kind of pushed right back into it. Because what ended up happening is I spent a full day practically looking for fish in the shallows, looking for spawning fish, looking for staging fish. I didn't even see any. The water's super clear out there on Lake Toho, so I would be able to see those fish. I didn't see dick, dude. Like nothing. Like there were some shiners shallow, but I did not see anything. I saw some old beds, but no signs that they were moving up hard. So there's a lot of offshore grass in Lake Toho, and it's offshore hydrilla. And what I've found, at least in Florida, it kind of applies in Alabama too. If there's hydrilla around, and specifically hydrilla, you know, other grasses are good and whatever, but there's something about hydrilla that if it's in a lake, that's where the majority of the fish are going to be, hands down. Now, granted, there can usually be a lot of grass in a lake. Lake Toho has a lot of hydrilla in it, so it spreads the fish out. But there's a lot of offshore hydrilla, and frankly, those fish are in there. That's where they're at, and a lot of it's deep, 6 to 8 foot. So basically, I pushed out on the end of the first day and started exploring that, and dude, immediately started getting bites. Fish are schooling. You're seeing activity. You know, you're seeing movement. And I could actually see him. I was telling you guys in some of the earlier videos, I saw him on the active target moving around, and that was the most action that I'd seen, hell, since I got there. So I transitioned late in the first day to fishing basically offshore hydrilla. The key bait that day was this one right here. This is, yes, it's just a Vision 110, you know, your standard Vision 110, but as you can see, let me turn it over. This is a silent Vision 110. It means there's no, other than the hooks jangling, there's no rattle in there. And the trick with that is it was dead flat out there. Like conditions that you want for water skiing, that you want for swimming, you do not want for fishing. Dead flat, but it ended up kind of making those fish school, but they're very tentative about what they'd bite. I couldn't get them to bite like a rattling bait. And gold down here is a killer color that's kind of like a gold ghost looking color, but that silent jerkbait was absolutely killer the first day, and they were schooling. So the other thing that actually really came into play was these guys. I've been actually catching a lot of fish. Magnum fluke, a big old 7-inch fluke. I actually caught them on stick marsh using that thing, and it's just been kind of a tool. It seems like the fish are kind of up in the water column, even on some of the deeper lakes that I fish. So having a bait that kind of travels in that mid-depth range, a soft plastic jerkbait is a little more subtle presentation, you know, but still that darting back and forth, walk the dog action. But I caught some on that, all targeting hydrilla 6 to 8, 6 to 9 feet. The big key was, though, that I kind of figured out on the first day is there's these domes of hydrilla out there. Basically, they're big chunks, big mats, and you wanted to kind of find these isolated, it's almost like, well, when we talk about punching mats, you're looking for kind of that lonely grass. Well, there's a bunch of grass out there, so it's hard to identify what's lonely. But instead, you look at, all right, the majority of the topped off grass is right here, and you look for little kind of like out juts, like little domes off of that main kind of grass head right there. And I found that those little kind of grass heads, not all of them by any means, but if you could find the right one, there'd be 5, 6, 7 fish on it, and usually good ones. There was a lot of dead water though, like 100%, like no bites. Like I'd look at my active target, there was nothing moving around. It was crazy. So on day 2, well, actually one other trick, they were schooling, so I did catch a few on this guy right here. This is my devil's horse. So basically, oh, and this old school for all you old school guys, little sluggo dude. Basically the recipe for the end of day 1 that led to kind of what I was thinking I'd do in day 2 is schooling fish. So day two was kind of our big bag day. It's when we really committed to a jerkbait, and because of the information that we found the day before, and it was this guy right here. My buddy Jacob Wall has been telling me about this thing forever. This is a Nishine 115 Erie. What makes this jerkbait a little bit different are a couple things. One, it's a little bit bigger. It's 115 centimeter. It also has, if you guys look, it has that little dangle weight right there. Do you see that thing? So it has that little dangle weight on the front hook right there. So bigger, making it more castable. The gear on it's a little bit stouter, but that front weight is kind of interesting because what it actually does is when it's in the water, you'll jerk it, and at least in the water, I guess the water density that we had on Toho, it would slowly sink, like inch by inch, kind of like a Senko or a stick bait. And that, I think, really was the key. So we ended up catching, what is it, a couple 5.5s, a 6, couple 1 or 2 4s, and then a couple 3-pounders, and then some rats to go along with it. But there was one key area, and I think there was like shell on the bottom, or there was some kind of like little current sweep going on. But once again, it was, you'd find that big chunk of grass, and then you'd fish every little kind of clump around it, kind of like outside of it that was isolated, and it basically found 2 of those little clumps that were the magic juice clumps, the juice, if you will. So I got bit like 7 or 8, 9 bites in the morning for about 2 hours. The wind kicked up a little bit. I spent 4 hours hopping around different grass clumps out there, because there's a bunch of them, and never got a bite. I think I caught one other dink. I went back to the stretch that I found. I caught a 5.5 in 20 minutes of being there, 5 and change. And then basically left there and went and tried to duplicate that pattern again. Ran around for, God, it had to be like 4 hours again, 3.5. Caught a couple dinks here and there, and basically went back and sort of expanded on my area, I guess you'd say, and I caught a 6-pounder. So there was something to that stretch, that sort of big clump of hydrilla with a couple little sprouts off of it. The other interesting thing is I noticed that there was sort of maybe a 200-yard square where I would see fish moving around on my active target when I had it on scout mode, or whatever it's called, perspective or scout mode, and that's where I got bit. In other places that looked right, that had the right components, they had 6 to 8, 6 to 9 feet of water, they had the clumpy hydrilla, they had clear bottom in between the clumps, dude, there was nothing moving around and I won't get bit. So the active target was seriously, it was key. So on the 3rd day, I went out with my buddy Gage. I'll put a link to him down in the description box. You can go check him out. Super cool kid, high school angler, or former high school angler, but just a really good kid and a great stick on Toho. Catches them really well. But we went out, and I wanted him to show him like my little jerkbait thing I figured out, because I've always struggled on Toho, and he does really well out there. So we went out, was not nearly as epic as the day before, but we also didn't grind through. We ended up getting kind of blown off the lake. The wind really kicked up, and you would think that would make it better. But I think in the situation, especially with that jerkbait bite and around those domes, I think the bait is kind of set up and situated. So we actually ended up catching fish around the same areas, caught like a three and change, a couple 2-pounders, and some little rats. But that wind, I think, caused that bait to kind of shift around. Now, we didn't adapt. There's no doubt about it. And I think we probably could have gotten some bigger bites if we would have committed and hung around those kind of chunks of grass. But it seemed like the fish were a little more spread out. So I'm wondering if maybe like turning to sort of maybe a Carolina rig, so you're fishing a little bit slower, but like above that bottom grass. That's actually one rig that I wish I really would have tried, is a Carolina rig with a longer leader. It's an old school Florida approach when you're fishing kind of through deep grass. It basically, the longer leader keeps the bait above the grass, but you're still able to put that 1/2 ounce, 3/8 ounce weight on there to kind of sink it down and make a long cast and make it more manageable in the wind. Could not get bit on a worm, could not get bit on a wacky rig. I tried to wacky rig some of these fish. You know, some of the things that you think would work really well, kind of staying in that mid-depth water column, I try to swim bait. I really just, I could not catch them on anything else but a jerk bait. And even, you know, even talking to Gage, he mentioned it's been kind of a hit or miss. You know, it's been good, it's been bad. But that mild weather down here in Florida is actually not very good. You want it to be cold and kind of wintry, and that's what causes the big ones to bite. But the real magic deal was this guy, that Nishina 115, and really committing to it. The other interesting thing I'll note too is I was throwing it on a medium action rod, 7-foot Halo TI with a 721 reel, and here's the kicker: 12-pound test. 12-pound test around some really dense hydrilla. I do think, I don't want to get too like Mr. Details with it, because I kind of get annoyed when guys are like, yeah bro, if you don't use the right light line, they don't bite. You know, it's like, yeah bro, you're an idiot. Like, it's just, but there was something to maybe not the 12-pound test, maybe just running a bigger jerkbait that does that slow sink, getting down to the grass though, and having that bait run teensy hair deeper was huge. I think a Vision +2 or a Vision +1, Mega Bass Vision +1 ran a little bit deep. It would actually get hung in the grass a little too much. It's also a little harder to cast. That Nishina, I could make long casts and precise casts with it, but it did just get down a little quicker, and that slow sink, that just head down kind of slow sink, is a big player, dude. But that's my recap on Lake Toho. If you guys got any questions, drop them down in the comments box. I'll put links to the videos that we did. We did 2 days of video out there, and then on the 3rd day, we hung out with my buddy Gage. You probably guys saw some clips from being with him. But I'll put links to all the baits that we caught them on Toho, and we'll see how these Toyota Series guys do out here on the Toho chain. All right, guys, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll see you back out on the water, or talking maybe about some of these guys. All right, later.